Welcome to Warblog. Today we're looking at the Guam Airbase Emergency Deployment Readiness exercise. First thing to say, it's quite interesting, but it's not a proper scenario. So ordinarily where I'd be doing proper scenarios, I tend to do things that I'm just trying to figure out what this is doing down here, but it keeps vanishing from the mouse in there. Yeah, so it's just a training exercise, and so what we've got here are sort of an unidentified enemy. I mean, basically they're sort of, I think they're considering it's Chinese. So the United States carried exercise to land 2 companies of paratroopers on Guam, or a battalion, airbase in the light of Chinese developments in the Indo-Pacific Command area. So now the thing is, it raises lots of interesting questions, and so that's sort of why I've included it really. I've written a bunch of my own thoughts here. Actually, it does say my own thoughts, obviously full of spellings, because when I think I don't spell properly with thinking, etc, etc. I'm not going to go into that now because I'm going to talk about it in the video. Just really can't spell at all in the middle. Anyway, when you look at it on the south front sight, there it is. So there's 2 of these planes checking out all these people, and so my first thoughts are, to some extent, if you look at it, it's like a a fairly significant operation, but you sort of think, well, they don't do a lot of paratroop landings generally. I mean, for example, I quite often say, why didn't the GNA or the LNA in particular, when they're carrying out their offensive, do something a little more adventurous than just keep hitting their head against the wall? Do some paratrop landings or helicopter landings. I mean, this is the air mobile thing that the Vietnam War was particularly key on, and they don't seem to ever do much of that. And sort of thinking, well, here they are practicing that. You sort of think, well, in my thoughts, I basically cover a few things, but the first thing I think is you could only really do this. It's just a tool. You can only do this under the right circumstances. If this was heavily defended, they would probably all get shot. But if it wasn't, if it was a complete surprise, then you could get away with it. It would be genius. I often think about the Incheon landing as a sort of military genius. I didn't say it was, but I mean it's generally construed that it was in that league. A good idea, sort of something. That's what military strategy, to a large extent, leans towards. Most military strategy is just common sense, but things like that are things that make the difference in many instances. Like the fortitude to carry out the D-Day landings. I mean, it takes a little more sort of assertive thinking to consider the options that you've got with your tools. And so this is a tool, so you wouldn't necessarily do it all the time. I mean, if this was actually captured by the Chinese, you might find, because we'll talk about this in here, that they would have advanced auto anti-airborne armaments. I mean, these would be like, computer sighting AA guns that are designed to basically to automatically target, knowing where the bullets are going, tracing the bullets, and automatically targeting, paratroops landing. But on the other hand, if you were to drop this, say, on a place where you've got, say, 30 technicals with heavy machine guns, you would have certain limits as to what would happen. First off, it would take them a long time to actually figure out what was happening. By the time they might see that, and they'd be thinking, well, what's that? Are these sort of like bombs? Are these like airport landing bombs? And then it might take them a while for all of them, or some of them, or any of them. They might be, they're not always sitting there with their guns. They might be sort of, having a sandwich or something and taking YouTube videos. And by the time they figure it out, they've landed. And so you might think, well, if this was the case, how long would it take? 30, even 30 is a lot. So if this was, say, in Tripoli, Tripoli Airport, for example. How long would it take them to actually react, respond, and actually start targeting? And even then, even if they started targeting, would they be able to hit at that range? And I think I even suggested this in here. I wasn't going to go through this, but you could drop dummies and count how many have bullet holes in them. So you could sort of say, okay, well, we could drop all these, and under an exercise, and just see how long it took the enemy A to respond and B to actually hit anything. Now, once on the ground, it's slightly different because you'd have such a wide field of fire that anything advancing probably would have a lot of difficulty unless you advance in the other direction. But coming from there, across all this open ground towards maybe these little vehicles here would be quite difficult. So you would have to have some sort of air support otherwise. And I guess that what they didn't do in here was to bomb all these buildings or to interdict them in some way. And that's probably what they would be doing. They probably have air sorties coming in every minute or so, just strafing and bombing all of this sort of stuff to give them covering fire, maybe lots of smoke. I'm sure that the full theatrical performance would be slightly different. And so it just intrigues me really as to the sort of this exercise. I know they've done other exercises. I've seen videos of them in Europe where they don't just drop troops. They drop jeeps and AFVs and tanks and all sorts, and sometimes they just fall. That's always the funny one. I've never seen one video where one of them just fell, and when it landed, it caught on fire, and the observers are sort of just sitting there observing this thing on fire, and then it suddenly dawns on them that maybe they should tell someone that it's on fire. So it's not the first time they've practiced these sorts of things, but I just think that it's worth looking at. So anyway, I'm going to just sort of play it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. But there you are. So there's your two companies forming a battalion of 400 men. So, if there's 400 men, 200 people per company, there's two companies. There might be three of lesser amounts. I'm giving them nice strong numbers. But here's the airport. So the first thing to consider is, do you want to land right on top of them? Well, you can't because it's a game. But do you want to land in these hexes or these hexes? Now, obviously, we can't land in the urban hexes because they might land on electric pylons, houses, roofs, swimming pools, trees, or whatever. So obviously, it's a perfect landing point, the airport. So I think I'm going to land them both here. Now, this is probably not the best game to reflect this. This is sort of probably more down to something like whatever, the squad leader type tactical thing, because there's just so much that might happen. Interdicted fire and sort of our turn's over now, so what can we do? Nothing. What can they do? Nothing. But obviously they'll be firing at that. But what are they going to do? Come out here? Well, maybe not. So they're just going to sit there. They're blue, which is the colour for Americans, but there's red to show that they are the unidentified enemy. But we all know that's probably the Chinese. So that's that. So the question is, on their turn, what do they do? Well, nothing, because they can't. They're not prepared. There's nothing that they can do, really. And so it's now the Americans' turn with their two battalions on the ground. So the first thing to do maybe would be to take that bit of the airport and there, and to attack. Let's see what the odds are. Yeah, 6-1. So it's a DE. So we pushed them out of the Guam Airbase. However, they can move back in and carry it. We're not going to carry out any attrition. Okay. So, but obviously, can attack again, pushing them out. And this time we can move in with these guys. They can move in as well, just for good measure. see them on their way. And that's it. Now, obviously, you wouldn't expect much else. But, you know, I mean, even a simple simulation like this will give you some sort of leverage into sort of considering, well, what else could happen? I mean, you know, I mean, maybe they were entrenched. I mean, I don't see any signs of entrenchments. You know, it's not as though these, but you could say, well, these are heavily fortified buildings. You know, but they were in urban, so that covers that. They got the bonus for being in there. But there could have been more of them. We only had one company of 1-1-3 stats. I mean, there could have been a 3-3-3 stats, which would have meant that they would have been a lot tougher, and it might have not worked. You know, we haven't included the possible preparatory fire, and as I said, it's a strategic game, and it doesn't lend itself to this. I mean, this would be a squad leader type thing if you wanted to really play it and really model it. You know, this is quite simply, you know, not the way to model that kind of engagement. It's very simplistic, but you know, from a strategic point of view, it does give you, you know, certain insights into what's happening. I mean, for example, I said at the beginning, you know, if this was the Chinese, they probably wouldn't have just one little company there. They would probably have it heavily defended. But what about the other places? I mean, what about Yapo Beach, Paseo de Susana? You know, why not sort of carry out, you know, marine landings there and there, or here? Because this is all sort of marshy beach type, tropical beach, I think, around here. You know, what other options were there? I mean, why not land here with special ops and go through the jungle in the middle of the night and do a surprise attack, you know, in the morning? Why not do both? Why not have, you know, your special ops land here, you know, the night before, you know, creep along through the sewage pipes up to here, blow everything up, and then land the planes down here so they don't even have to jump out. You know, I mean, there's lots of ways of doing it, and I'm not saying that one, I even come up with an idea there, but, you know, if you were to sit and look at that, and the fact that they're doing those sorts of exercise indicates that they're thinking, you know, obviously, but, you know, there's so many ways of thinking and so many ways of looking at those sorts of things. You know, I mean, the airbase is actually quite significant in size, but, you know, I mean, it's like the Second World War. Obviously, the US had a lot of, you know, activity in the Pacific area, and taking the islands was bloody. You know, I mean, quite often then their strategy was to blow them up with naval barrages before, and obviously the Japanese at the time heavily entrenched into the mountains, into the hills. You know, so much so that, you know, they weren't actually really being damaged or attritioned in any way. But obviously that takes a lot of time and effort, and, you know, Guam doesn't look as though it's got the same sort of hilly terrain. But, you know, I mean, so etc. etc. So it's food for thought. So I've included it just because it is so particular, and yeah, I mean, that's that really. I mean, I don't have much more to say. You know, I could talk forever, but I'm not going to. We might do another game just for the hell of it. But there you go. That's what an airborne landing looks like on a large airfield. I'll speak to you later. Cheerio.